Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Monique Lanier. Monique Lanier is an artist and learner. She writes music. She's a photographer. She designs scarves and bodywear. She creates herbal magic. She has acted on stage and in TV and film, and she is currently studying comparative religion online and plans to pursue this field until she receives her Ph.D. Welcome to the podcast, Monique.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, and I'm excited to have you. So why don't you start out by telling us where you came from and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so where did I come from, right? That's a big question. Where do we come from? And being a religious studies student, I think about that all the time. But the basic generic facts are, I was born here in Utah, and was born to so there was a lot of, from the get-go, a lot of really just dark stuff, really hard stuff. And those are my earliest memories. And things stayed like that for a super long time. I didn't really get any relief from that probably until I was 16. Lived with my grandparents, got a scholarship, and went to college. And then I had this strange thing of being discovered. And then I went to Los Angeles. Is that where you are?
No, I'm in Georgia.
You're in Georgia. Okay. So I was discovered in a bizarre way. So my life has had some very strange interventions, right? So I was on the show Life Goes On. I don't know if you remember that show. It's about a kid who had Down syndrome. So I was on that show, and while I was on that show, I got pregnant with a beautiful girl who was very, very sick, really, really ill. So I left the show, and went from making lots and lots of money to being on welfare because of how ill she was, and was a single mom. Tried to go back to school during that time, and then I had a stroke. And I discovered I have a little mass, or a lesion might be the more appropriate word. That hemorrhage, this big pop in my head and all of that. And of course that changed everything for me. I wasn't able to read. And I love school so much. And so I lost that. She eventually got better. It was really a brutal experience for her. 15 years of that. And I tried to go back to school for a long time, couldn't do that. Long-term migraines, still kind of navigate that stuff. Finally got to go back to school at 52, and things are going well. So that's kind of the big moments of it. But of course, there's an entire life in between all of those big points.
Yes. So how old is your daughter now?
She is 30.
Okay.
She just graduated from grad school, and she's a miracle. She's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. That is beautiful. So in your bio, I was reading all different things. Let's start out with an artist. What kind of art do you do?
So I do a lot of different things. I have a couple CDs. I've been writing music my whole life. I took an interest in photography and editing an image. I have a book, a photographic essay that I did about the abuse as a kid. It was a very cathartic and probably a heavy book, but really important, right? I feel very strongly about, while I'm not necessarily a dark person myself, I feel very supportive of entering that space with an open heart and getting into it and creating pieces that express it. I think that sometimes often we have this spiritual preference for a certain type of emotion, right?
Mhm.
That says, if I'm happy and light and full of love, that indicates that I've arrived, right? I've arrived. And that if I never display grief and sadness and like or if those experiences take too long, that somehow we can feel like we're failing.
Mhm.
And so I'm an advocate, a strong advocate for making sure that we don't dismiss, abandon ourselves in those long-term places. So I did this photographic essay about that, those abusive things called The Returns. I love image, and so those are those are some of the artistic things that I've done.
Wow. And it is really important to grieve when we have losses. I know so many times we walk into work or into church or into a social event somewhere, and you never know what's happening behind that veil of the smile that people walk in with. You don't know what's happening before they walk in the door from wherever they're coming from. And so many people have things that they're grieving.
Mm-hmm.
They have grief and they have losses. And so many times, like you said, we're just kind of like painting over it's a black wall. We're painting over white to try and make it look okay. But the fact of the matter is that wall is black underneath there. And,
Yeah,
I know I lost a fiance back in 2016 and,
wow,
I,
that's recent. Yeah.
yeah, and it took me a really long time and I did kind of beat myself up like, can't you get yourself together? I mean, it probably took
Right.
me a couple years to really get back to myself, and people would say, why don't you do this? Or just, I would
Right.
give an opportunity, but I just couldn't do it right then. I mean, I was surviving. I found a full-time job so that I could cope, if you will, and make sure money was coming in or whatever. But
Right.
it took me that, a couple of years to really get back to myself.
Well, and I think the other side of that is like these major events actually change us, right?
Mhm.
Like how do we get, like, for me personally, having my daughter and the 15 years of tending to her and watching, I mean, she suffered immensely. I've often thought I am not the same person. I'm not the same person.
Mm-mm.
I had an emotional breakdown for sure, like 2.5 years ago. And I'm not the same person from that, right? And there's so much pressure and this I don't know if it's unspoken kind of teaching. We assume that we're supposed to get back up, get on that horse, and practice this positive thinking, and that if we don't display this, we're somehow spiritually deficient, or we haven't like risen up. And so I'm writing this book called The Ghetto of Grief, and it's this what I have experienced and what I've seen happen is this segregation, right? We segregate these experiences that are actually beautiful, healing, rich, lush, vital experiences, right?
Mhm.
And we do this on this micro level within ourselves and within our own social circles. We also do this on the macro level as a nation, right?
Mhm.
With our own histories of slavery and what happened with the indigenous peoples. And we have these um, unbelievable things that we don't know how to speak, and so we segregate. We put them away, but they continue to inform and filter our existence. Like you said, someone comes and they've got this glossed over thing just so they can function, but it is the basis and foundation of their entire life. And so I am calling for, and it's nothing new, I'm not saying anything new, right? But this reintegration of these places that we deem moral and spiritual failures. That's kind of what I'm talking about lately.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, so obviously we can't show up to places and be crying or in tears or show up in grief, because we, first of all, no one would know what to do with us. They wouldn't know how to react to us.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, what is the difference between healthy grief and handling it and actually going out into society, and your attitude of being positive or negative? You see the distinction I'm making there?
Absolutely.
You can grief and not necessarily have negative energy.
Right. Well, I think this quote unquote negative energy comes from the attempt to sever, right? The attempt to buck up, right, instead of acknowledge. And I think it's this social need of all of us to make space for each other when we are hurting, right? So we have to, I'm not saying we have to, but I feel personally like, oh, I'm hurting, I better do this. And then that creates that awkward disconnect, right?
Right.
And then that quote unquote negative stuff comes out. And what I can do as a person, I think we all share these empathic qualities. We all sense when someone is hurting. We all know it. And when we see that quote unquote negative stuff, I think if we go, oh, there's something else going on, right? I'm sure there's something else going on. And if we stay with it and make space for the person to be awkward and clunky and clumsy, as opposed to furthering their own unbelonging, right? To furthering saying, I'm just going to set up these arbitrary boundaries and you're negative and I'm going to keep you outside. But if we can step in and bring in with an understanding of there's something else going on.
Yeah, and
if we can all do that, right?
Yeah, and
Does that make sense?
We want to be authentic with ourselves. When we're in grief, we want to be authentic with ourselves, and sometimes that's really, really difficult because, like I said, you can be beating yourself up, like I did sometimes, or thinking, oh, I should be doing something else, but that's not really being authentic. And then the people around someone who is in grief also needs to allow them to be in their authentic self, and they need to be in their authentic self. I know after I lost my fiance, I was so much more sensitive to anyone who lost a loved one. I had never really experienced that close, someone I was so close to, and it really made a difference in my empathy level.
What was your experience with that? I mean, especially because you have this path and you focus on this happiness and fulfillment. Did you feel extra pressure to present yourself in I'm okay, what kind of way?
Yeah, I think not even from the time I was actually having this message, but probably even since a child, it's always I'm okay. I mean, I remember going to work after different kinds of loss, and no one ever knew what was going on in my home or what I was going through, because I always came in, I smiled, I put on my work face, and I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah, right. And so where did you experience your grief? Was it compartmentalized and then you came home and felt it? Did you have friends you could talk to? Or?
Yeah, I mostly would just process process it at home. You know, when I
With
was
yourself?
alone, I'm an introvert, so I'd just go and I would do journaling or say my prayers or, read something that was encouraging or healing for me.
And where are you at now with it? What does it feel like now?
When it comes to the loss of my fiance, I've pretty much moved on. I still remember him sometimes, but then when I remember him now, I just remember the good times. I just remember the happy things.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And do you feel like you had the support you needed? And did you feel
oh yeah,
supported?
I feel like, my family was very supportive.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's interesting that when that happened and you said you were all of a sudden in tune with others, that it had that. I think that's a really interesting and poignant thing you said, that you were in tune with it.
And I think that's true of a lot of different categories. I mean, if you were abused as a child, you can understand someone else who was abused as a child. If you were whatever the situation is, if you have a sick child
Yeah.
and other mothers who had a sick child, you can definitely understand each other's pain and loss and what you went through, where others
Yeah.
really can't.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So in this book that you're writing, tell me about that.
Well, so it's called The Ghetto of Grief, and as I was saying, I am interested and passionate about how we segregate grief, and not just grieving, but the negative, as you said, like these negative emotions, and what that does to not only the individual, but the community, the nation, the world. Right? I feel deeply protected, like I want to champion the experiences that I believe are not indicative of, as I was saying, moral failure. I believe that there is a preference, that we show this preference for what we talked about, these positive emotions.
Right.
And while I think these positive emotions there's nothing wrong and we should never abandon those, but I don't think we can fully inhabit them and fully express those without giving the other experiences their fair witness, their say, their life. They have to have that. And if we don't do that, as I was saying, they will fester and rot and affect, filter, and pervert our life's experience. I think that we're seeing that now with what's happening in our world, right? With the tribalism and the divisiveness, with how it affects the ecosystems, right? And I believe that we put these blinders on, not because we're shallow, terrible people, but because we have not learned skills of what we do with that, right? We are unskilled, and I believe that these things need to be tended to. As I said before, with the indigenous people, I mean, so obviously I'm just speaking here of our Western world, but the indigenous people, the slavery, and so forth, these things don't go away, right? This is our ancestors calling to us. While we may not have perpetuated these crimes, we are connected through our ancestry. That's what I believe. And we are not atomistic creatures only responsible for this bubble world. We are affected, and we must make reparations, even if it's as small as acknowledgement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But tell me more about that. So let's say that people, their heart is in healing the planet. What
Yeah.
are some of the things that we could start to do to go in that direction?
So I think it's as simple as, so there's lots to do, right? But I think it's as simple, some simple steps. I don't think it's simple. I think some simple steps would be to giving as much reverence and honor, to the call of outrage and grief as we do to the call for happiness and fulfillment, right? That we allow those spaces when people that we may not understand they may be people in our own families, and they may be experiences within us. And we could listen for 5 seconds, right? I think 5 seconds changes that. And that we allow, I believe, attachment heals. I believe opening heals. I believe listening for a moment and experiencing someone else's call heals. I believe that heals the planet. I believe those are small steps. And another way that I'm happy that you asked that, because I think I can get all like, well, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? So when someone is in our world that is, I really liked how you asked about this negative energy. And when someone is in our circles that is, let's say they're always negative, right? They're always talking about these things, and you're like, can you just stop talking about that? Like, oh my God, are we done talking about that yet? There's something that needs to be heard. And what we tend to do, because we don't know how to deal with that, is we tend to start to segregate, right? And we put them in this ghettoed place. They're like, I want my space to be clear and clean, and I've got to put up these places. And we start to further push them away. We just like, I don't want them in my world. And I'm not advocating for abuse, to be abused in any way, but I am advocating for maybe us taking a little bit of time to say, what am I not hearing that they want to say? What am I not hearing? What are they trying to say to me? Why am I being uncomfortable here? Why am I so anxious to get to the good stuff and the positive stuff and the happy stuff? Why am I uncomfortable? What do I need to hear? How can we have these conversations? I had a really difficult conversation with a family member who is of a different and difficult political understanding than I am. And he said something at one point where I thought, oh my gosh, can I continue this conversation? I don't know if I should. Is it even worth it? My heart sank. I was so sad. And I thought, it's pointless. We're not going to get anywhere. And I heard what he had to say, and I thought, let me just say one thing. Let me just hang on the phone a little bit longer. And we got somewhere. And it was a long conversation, and it was super hard. And it was a conversation where I would have unfriended him on Facebook. Right? I would have been, nope, this is my boundaries, and I don't want to see this. And nope, we're done. And he was upset and hurting, and I was upset and hurting, but we got somewhere. And so that's what I mean in the, well, what does that mean to heal the planet? Those conversations heal the planet. He was uncomfortable, I was uncomfortable, and we kept going. That's what I mean. Does that Is that easier?
That does make sense. So what I'm hearing, well, first of all, I'm thinking about times when I'm in conflict with someone else as far as my opinion. And my strategy has always been to chunk up, which, in other words, find some universal something that we both can agree on,
Yeah.
at least that. And I
Yeah.
love the word you used earlier, reverence. I think that we really need to have reverence for every individual, regardless of what they believe or who they are, or, what we think about what they're doing.
Yeah. That's
There's at
hard,
least,
isn't it?
yeah, it can be really hard, especially if someone's doing something that you think is really wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but there's still, a soul created by God, and they deserve that reverence and that love and that acceptance just the way they are. I'm a Christian, so I talk about God. Other people talk about other things, but God accepts everybody just equally, and we're all beautiful. And so if that person is that way to the highest person in the universe, then who are we to not give reverence and love to someone? And if you have reverence and love for someone, even when you disagree, you can disagree and even talk together and find some common points, and you may still disagree, but at least you both are being respectful and reverent of the God within everyone.
Yeah. Right. And that is easy for you and I to say, because you and I are obviously having this sweet conversation and this lovely connection, and right, and I'm listening to you and you're listening to me. It gets super challenging when, let's say right, so I've had this super difficult life, um and I do have PTSD, and so I do talk about things over and over and over, and then I get upset about that. Then I can feel other people be like, oh, and or if I get triggered and then that affects somebody else, and then I get freaked out, like, oh no, I'm a bother again, and then I get anxious, which is that negative stuff, and it just is this exponential, chaotic thing. And when we can, as you say, this reverence of, it's okay, I'm not leaving. I hear you in this struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You hear me in this struggle, and we're not going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we often, because we don't have these skills, and as I, keep harping on, that we segregate and we deem these other things negative, and we don't know how to deal with that, we abandon people. We abandon ourselves.
Yeah.
We get impatient, and we just like, we abandon, we shame, because we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can just, I'm asking a lot here, but little baby steps,
Uh-huh.
little baby steps heal. I mean, when someone just listens to me, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it's okay if I'm scared. It's okay if I said it one more time. It's okay if I'm not over it. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Everything about me goes, oh, and then I'm not a weirdo anymore.
Yeah. As you're
Right?
talking, I'm saying, we judge ourselves harder than we judge anyone else. And
Yeah.
then when we feel that separation from others, it makes us just feel worse.
It makes you more crazy. It makes you act like more of a weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the PSTD that, I'm not sure if I said that right.
PTSD.
Okay.
Post-traumatic stress syndrome. Yeah.
Yes. So when you're having those situations where that is coming up and you're stimulated again,
Yeah.
so what is it that you want from others at that point? Do you just want them to listen, like you were talking about, and understand? You just want them to hold space for you? What is it that you're wishing for the most when that's happening?
Well, so I sometimes people who are close to me know that I'm in it before I do, which is interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and then it depends on how bad it is, right? Um, and personally, I'm like, oh no, I'm here, um, and I'm going to upset everyone else around me.
Mhm.
That's where I'm at. And um, if I just know that I'm loved and it's okay, and that I'm not upsetting people, that's my personal PTSD. Unless it's really bad, then I just have to be alone, right?
Mhm.
But if it's just a mild thing where everything's raw and crazy and
Mhm.
stimulus is painful. Sounds are painful. Um, and especially if I feel like I'm bad, right? If I'm bad, um, and if I'm bothering someone. So to know that I'm loved,
Mhm.
I just need to know that it's okay and that no one's angry at me
Mhm.
for being in a place that I can't physically control.
Yes. So, are there tools or strategies that you've adopted over the years to help yourself when those things happen?
Yeah, so I don't leave the house. I um, I recognize that it's happening, and then I just have to wait it out because right, it's a physical thing, and then the mind completely betrays you.
Mhm.
So you can't rely on yourself to talk yourself out of it
Mhm.
because your mind is telling you everything is. I mean, your mind's on a trip,
Mhm.
so your mind can't talk you out of it. So you just gotta wait it out, and sometimes that takes a while.
Mhm.
And as I said, I usually don't know I'm in it until it's been going on for me.
Mhm.
So just kind of wait until it's over.
And do those
And
things?
sorry,
Oh, go
but
ahead.
I think that that's the challenge, right, for those around you, where you start to, and other people can feel it, right?
Mhm.
Other people know what's going on, and then you get this social feedback that they're like, right, and then you go, and then they go, right? And everybody starts going, and you realize that you're the impetus for that. That makes you more crazy.
Mhm.
And then guilt and shame starts happening. And so, um, and I think PTSD is a dramatic example of that. But
Mhm.
I think what I just described is a prime example of what happens just in other everyday uncomfortable situations.
Mhm. So, how do we walk out into the world as our authentic selves?
That's the question, right? I mean, that is the ultimate question. How do we do that?
Yeah.
And what the bigger question is, what is our authentic self?
Mhm.
And I don't know how we do that. Everyone has to answer that for themselves. I I don't know. I don't know how we do that. But I know that. So here's some ideas I have about that.
Okay.
I For me, it has been what I've just been talking about this whole time is reincorporating things about myself that I thought were undesirable
Ah, yes.
and saying this has just as much place and value and beauty
Mhm.
as all the other things that are so attractive about me, and that I need to reincorporate and build rooms for those places too, regardless of what happens when they come up with other people, because I'm the one who I live with.
Uh-huh.
I'm the one that I sleep with. I'm the one, I'm the one who beats myself up the most. I'm the one who shames myself. I'm the one who gets me out of fear. I'm the one who holds myself when I sleep. So I've got to somehow say, I'm going to make a photographic essay about this, and I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to write love poems to you about this, because I believe you are important, and I'm going to hear what you have to say. I'm going to dress you up in the finest clothes because you matter. I will not keep you in the dungeon any longer. Come up, come up, come up in the light. Let's have brunch.
Yes, I love that. Come up in the light. Come up in the light, bright light. Show yourself to the world who you really are. The quote unquote positives, negatives, weird,
Just come up.
whatever. Just whatever it is. Just come up and out as yourself. And isn't that what we all want? We want to come out as ourselves, and we want to be loved by others because of who we are. Just no matter who that is, just because of us, our unique selves.
It's imperative, don't you think? Don't you think we have to have that? I do.
It really is. So if someone, let's say someone, I don't know, just suffered some kind of grief, parent loses a child, or, some really devastating thing happens, what kind of conversations could we have with ourselves to just help ourselves through that?
I think a wonderful thing we can tell ourselves is there is no time limit. There's no time limit. You can be here as long as you need to. There is no roadmap here. I know there's 5 stages and you better get through them. That's not true. Right?
That's not always true, is it?
No. Right? Like you get to, and if you get through the 5 stages and you have to go again, that's fine. Right? Love and attachment is beautiful and gorgeous. And you get to take as much time. Like in fact, you never have to heal. I would say that too. This wound can be there, and you can have a gorgeous life with this wound still there, right? Like this wound, it touches my soul to know that I can have these wounds and I can have this stuff and be glorious and gorgeous and light and love, as well as all of these battle wounds too. Like I can have both.
Yes.
I can have both. You can have both.
Yeah. And there's beauty in those wounds.
Yeah.
And we are what we are from our experiences.
Right. There is no need to move on or get past or anything like that.
So, one of the things you talk about sometimes is spiritual poverty. What do you mean by that?
Probably just in connection to the ghetto, right? There's this just this ghetto. Like we have these ideas of like we get these accoutrements, right? Like we put on these spiritual things and we perform spirituality.
Yeah.
I'm spiritual. Look at this. Like I'm spiritual. I don't do this. I do this. I use this terminology. I don't use this terminology. I behave this way. I don't behave this way. And therefore, I am spiritual. Right? People who are not spiritual do this and this and this and this. And they don't do this and this and this and this.
And that is so relative to the person, isn't it? Your beliefs or what you grew up with.
Right. And we know from numerous scandals, both in Western, Christian, Buddhist, all kinds of traditions, that you can have someone who looks really, really good and who causes immense damage.
Yeah.
And we also know that there are people who don't say anything spiritual at all, who do beautiful, healing, amazing acts of kindness and never say a word about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I talk about spiritual poverty, I talk about these performances people do to look really good, and then those who follow them and then deem others inadequate spiritually or morally flawed, or those are the things that I'm concerned with. And you can be a raunchy person. You can be raunchy, right? You can look really worldly. You can not do yoga. You can not practice things. I don't mean to badmouth yoga. I love yoga. One of my dearest friends is a teacher, but I'm saying you can look bad. You can have all the things that make you look bad.
Mm-hmm.
No spiritual currency in your bank, right? And be a master, a spiritual master.
Mm-hmm. That is so true, because I'm thinking of somebody I knew that he was a rough character and rough and swore and just was rough. You think, oh gosh, and he was the kindest person. When something needed to be fixed, he went and fixed it. If someone needed to be rescued, he went and got him. I mean, but he was the unsung hero. He wasn't walking around saying I'm all spiritual, and he certainly didn't talk about his religion or anything like that.
Yeah. Isn't that, and don't you get excited about that stuff?
Yeah.
Like, surprise me, show me, like whatever that deity or that spiritual divinity. It's like, ooh, surprise me, keep surprising me.
So, which direction do you feel like we, as let's just start with the United States, how can we start to honor the individual, honor the person's sovereignty, honor the rights of each person? Being a broadcaster, I have to keep reminding myself to stay positive, because I'm really strong about anybody silencing my, freedom of speech. So everybody has these sensitivities where, they would be sensitive if you take that right or you take that sovereignty away from them. And I know I'm asking a really hard question, because, we have the racial things going on. And like you said, even from, I remember the Trail of Tears. And whenever I read that story, I just weep. I mean, I just, when you see people hurting others. So, and it's such a huge question, but what are some things you think would take us in the right direction?
To honor an individual's sovereignty, is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we start connecting with them.
So just one.
Yeah, we ask them about their experiences. I just got chills all over my body.
Mm-hmm.
But just like what you're doing, like we ask them, so what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Where have you been? What does it feel like? I feel like crying. Like, what does it feel like to be in your skin?
I love that question.
Yeah, and I don't even mean like the specific color of your skin, but like what? Tell me about you. Where do you come from? What do you think about racism? What do you think about religious freedom? Tell me about your family? Tell me about you?
Mm-hmm.
And these little connections that we get the privilege of that,
mm-hmm.
that heals. Like the conversation I had with my family member, hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it healed something for both of us. And it actually gave me hope. I was like, oof, we did something. we got somewhere. He asked me about my personal experience with something that was really hard and something he had very staunch, unmovable opinions about.
Mm-hmm.
And when I told him my experience, he was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. I mean, I don't agree with this and this, but I could see that. And that's how we do it.
Mm-hmm. So that helps you to understand where the other person's coming from, because you know, I know that you know, everybody has their own political thoughts or whatever, but I found that it really helps me when I read literature and things from the opposite side from what I believe. So,
Right, yeah.
you know, as far as politics, you know, if you're a liberal, you read conservative stuff, whatever. As far as religions, I've studied lots of religions, not because I'm necessarily going to convert to something else, but I want to understand why they believe what they believe. I want to understand why they're doing what they're doing and choose that life. And then
But
that,
there's nothing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
But there's nothing like talking to a person who actually practices it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm studying Buddhism right now and I'm reading all this stuff, but I just spent an hour today talking to someone who was a Buddhist. And I was like, oh, well, that makes, you know, I thought I read it. And then I was like, but what about this? And it's so different. And I was like, well, what are your views on this?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you reconcile that? And they were saying, well, this and this and this. And I was like, oh, okay. Talking, like we have to, we can't, we've got to connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think, anyway.
And I love that connection piece. Now you're studying comparative religion.
Yeah.
So why did you choose that, and what direction are you going with it?
I probably chose it because I was raised in a very religious home. And I experienced a lot of damage from that religion. And religion, so I don't study theology. I actually study the religion itself. And so it's fascinating. It's this umbrella for theology and history and sociology, and you learn a lot about people. I mean, people are always, religion is everywhere. Even if you're an atheist, you're in relationship to religion because you're saying no.
Right.
And so you can't escape it. People are extremely spiritual, mystical beings, even if they're saying, no, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll tell you all the reasons they're not. So it's powerful stuff. It's fascinating what we create to make sense of why things are the way
they are. Wow. So through all your experiences, you know, losses, celebrations, have you had any aha moments or some things that really helped you rethink something or had a new idea?
I think, and this sounds like, this doesn't sound like a big moment of self-promotion, but I had this moment that I thought, what if I'm right? And that for me was powerful because my entire life I thought I was stupid and bad and I doubted everything. So all my thoughts, all my actions, all my choices, like I was just submerged in self-loathing and self-doubt. And I had been taught that, right? From all angles, from the religion, from the abuse, and from how I was how I was responded to when I talked about the abuse. And so I just thought I'm obviously bad. I'm obviously brought this on myself. I'm crazy. And then I had this thought. So I'm very empathic, and I'm always getting these hits, you know, and then I'm like, no, I'm crazy. So I'm getting all this information constantly, And at the same time, I'm like, no, I'm crazy, crazy, crazy. So it's a very, very chaotic existence. And then I had this moment where I thought, what if I'm right?
Mm-hmm.
What if I'm right about everything?
Yes. And it's a possibility.
And not like everyone's wrong, or like I'm Jesus incarnate, and I know I'm not in that way, but just this kind of basic, simple, like, what if I belong here? What if the space I occupy is valid?
Mm-hmm.
What if that? And everything calmed down, and I was like, that might be okay.
I think that's huge. That's not a little thing at all.
Yeah.
Saying that the space that you're occupying is valid and you're valid. I mean, we all want to say that about ourselves and our lives.
Yeah, it was big. It was a lovely moment. And I keep going back to it, being like, hey, remember when you had that moment?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could do that now.
Uh-huh. Why don't you just do it every morning?
I can do that one.
Morning routine.
Hey.
So when you were talking about, the times when you were, doubting and self-loathing and feeling that way, I know there's a lot of people going through those feelings day by day, year after year.
It's
Any
brutal.
advice for them? Any tools for them that you could share?
I would probably say the same thing. It can take as long as it needs to take. Because when I feel like when we're in that spot, what makes it so much worse is this pressure, right? To get out of it.
Yeah.
Get over it. And then you beat yourself up some more, like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, why can't you do this? Why just flip it around? Like, be positive, right? And then you show up in these at work or with your friends, and you're like, why can't you just do it? Like, it's okay. Like, come on. Like, and you have this running tape in your head.
Mm-hmm.
It's painful, and it makes you uncomfortable to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And you know you're uncomfortable. Everyone knows you're uncomfortable. And then you're like, why can't you just be cool?
So just let yourself be and sit there with it. And but I would think it would be really uncomfortable to sit there for a really long time without getting very severely depressed or just unable to move.
Well, right. But there's millions of people who are already depressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're already there. We already have that. That's already happening. And so those of us who are depressed, we kind of try to get ourselves up and out of there and show up,
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're failures, go home and beat ourselves up some more. And I think it first has to, I can't speak for everyone, right? These are just ideas I'm throwing out, and maybe it will help someone. Mm-hmm. But I think it has to start with, it's okay if you're depressed and I love you.
Mm.
It's okay. And it can take as long as it needs to take.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have, if it takes the rest of your life, you are loved. If you can't get up, it's okay. You are loved. Mm. If you need to go get professional help, it's okay. You are loved. And you belong, and it's cool. Right? You don't have to pile up all this stuff on yourself to be something other than where you are. You belong, you matter. It's okay. It's okay. Just
I love that.
Here. Yeah, you're fine. You're loved. Let me give you a hug. It's cool.
Yeah, I love that. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and
Thank you.
I'm so happy that I had you on the podcast today, and thank you for all your insights, because I know there's a lot of people who are going through a lot of the same things, And I know that they needed to hear that, especially that it's going to be okay and you can take as long as you need to.
Yeah.
We all need to hear that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. It was an honor, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yes. So if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that? If they wanted to connect with you?
I'd love that. If I have a website, it's called Monique Lanier Website.
Okay.
Self-explanatory,
Uh-huh.
and it talks about my book, and then it has a contact tab, and you can email me, and I'd love to hear from anybody.
That is beautiful. So one last question before we get off today. What for you makes the most incredible, amazing life?
Um, so my heart and my dream would be to somehow, I don't want this to sound like I'm cool but or like super spiritual, because I just did this whole spiel about super spirituality. So, I would really like to be of service and to somehow create space for people who are marginalized and not heard.
Hmm.
I would really like to, and I don't know how that looks, but that's super important to me.
Mhm. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, thank you.